Thank you. I feel the pressure's really on now, and I'm desperately trying to think of a good Beatles joke to come up with to assure you that what I'm going to talk about will hopefully enthuse you, reassure you, and inspire you in terms of thinking about the range of the ways in which we can consider the role of technology in transport. My name's Sarah Sharples, and I'm the Chief Scientific Advisor for the Department for Transport, and it's a real pleasure to be here and to learn and hear so much about the Transport Technology Forum. I'm new to the department, well, relatively new. I joined in July last year, and being a Chief Scientific Advisor is a real privilege because my job is to provide independent challenge to the department, but also to provide support to the department in terms of how to respond to that independent challenge. And one of the things that is really, really important is making the connection between the work that's being done within the department, work that's being done in industry, work that's being done in local authorities, and work that's being done in academia. The Chief Scientific Advisor is not a walking Wikipedia anymore. I think when it was first brought in as a role to government departments, the Chief Scientific Advisor was expected to be the wise expert who knew everything about science. I hope I don't disappoint you. I don't know everything about science. But what my job is to do is to make those connections between people who do have that deep knowledge and embed it in the work of the department. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the role of science and technology within the department. So the first thing I really want to highlight is that we are constantly seeing a phase of evolution and revolution in the world of transport. These photos that you see on the screen here show the rapidity of the change that we saw in London streets as we moved from horse-drawn movement to motor vehicle movement, and then the rapid expansion in motor vehicle movement. I'm reading a book at the moment, I'm only early in it, called The History of Motion. And it talks about the environmental challenges that were presented with horse-drawn carriages in London in the late Victorian times, and how people were so concerned about the environmental impact and were really angsting about what to do about this environmental pollutant that they found as the sort of scourge of their living. And of course, we're seeing a real revolutionary change in the way in which we travel happen right now. Everything from the introduction of autonomy in logistics to the change in the way that we charge our vehicles. So one of the great things about working in the world of transport is this constant evolution that leads to revolution in the way that we change the way we live and the way we move. Now, one of the things, and I don't know if anyone is here who was at my presentation at the Smart Transport Conference in Leeds a couple of weeks ago, I want to reassure you that these are the only two slides that are the same as in that presentation. One of the things that I did when I joined the department was I said, right, where's my list of research priorities for the department? And everyone looked at me a little bit confused and said, well, we've got some areas of research interest. It's a brilliant document. 239 areas of research interest. And so I was like, well, that's great. What that tells me is there's loads and loads for roles of science and engineering across the department, but it doesn't tell me what the priorities are. And so my colleagues have sort of led a 6-month process of development of what will be a living document. These slides are different from the slides I showed 2 weeks ago because we're doing a continual process of review and revision of the research priorities. They will be different in 2 weeks' time as well. But what we've managed to do is to identify the priority research and development and demonstration questions for each of 4 strategic priorities for the department. Those 4 priorities being around reducing environmental impacts, improving transport for the user, global impacts, and levelling up and growing the economy. And so what I'm just going to do is provide a bit of a whistle-stop tour as to my thoughts as to the role of technology in addressing just a few of these questions that you see before you. So one of the first questions is around how we design the transport system to ensure it's putting users at its heart. I'm just going to move here because I can't see the slides and I'm going to feel sick if I keep going like that. And you don't want to see that. So how do we design the transport system to ensure it's putting users at its heart? Well, there's all sorts of ways that we need to understand users, and there is a balance between responding to user needs, responding to user understanding of technology, responding to user diversity. You see on the left there a really nice sort of innovation project that was funded through one of the DFT schemes that looks at addressing issues of capacity in rail while also maintaining comfort. But we are all different shapes and sizes. We all have different needs, different mobility capabilities. And then, of course, we have the requirements for accessibility for those who hold disabilities as well. But we need to get this balance between understanding and designing our transport systems to accommodate as diverse needs as we possibly can, but also thinking about where we need to change behaviour. So how do we think about the way in which we provide transport to encourage more spread of transport use throughout the day so that then we can address capacity issues through balancing the use of our public transport at different times of day. So there's a balance between the behavioural science, the influence of behaviour, and then the respond to and understanding of user needs that we then design to accommodate. I'm very, very keen. If someone talks to me about education as being the solution for change in transport, then I get a little bit cross. Because actually, we can only do so much through education and sort of information. I believe that there's a huge opportunity that we have through the way in which we design our transport systems to accommodate and influence behaviour. But we've not only got the sort of technologies that we see around us today, we've also got emerging technologies. Now, some of those we're starting to see embed within the way in which we design transport. So I've got a few sort of prompts around technologies that range from AI and autonomy. So what role does artificial intelligence play in the way in which we design our future transport systems? Massive role in terms of the way in which we design logistics operations and autonomy at ports. Where we have dangerous or hard to deliver human tasks, then autonomy can provide a real opportunity for us to increase efficiency and actually increase safety of our transport system. But we also have technologies such as position, navigation and timing that form a fundamental part of many of our transport systems, everything from understanding how train doors open to the way in which we control aircraft. And then we have real novel technologies such as quantum technologies. So we've now got a team within the Department for Transport that are thinking about some of these future technologies and understanding what the transport use cases might be, but also what risks they potentially present in terms of our reliance on those transport technologies, and thinking about, therefore, what we need to do to respond. The way in which quantum technologies might change the way we deliver transport may be through completely changing the way in which autonomous vehicles are able to gather information about their surroundings. Maybe we could completely revolutionise the way in which we design our train timetables through quantum technologies. So understanding the role of quantum technologies and other emerging technologies in transport is also part of our mission. But then we're also seeing technologies that are slightly closer to market. One of the programs that I'm a huge fan of within the department is the Future Transport Zones. The Future Transport Zones that many of you will be familiar with and even part of have enabled coalitions, in many cases of local authorities, to explore in a practical context the use of new technologies and think about the specific use case that they have and how new technologies might help. An example of this is in the Solent, where they're looking at the opportunity of using drone technologies to deliver medical supplies because of the particular geographical challenge that they have. But we see other examples through the Future Transport Zones that are looking at implementation of new data solutions to manage traffic, or other types of innovations that can improve the traveller and the customer experience. But I think one of the things that's really, really important is that we don't just have these future transport zones delivering their technology in those local settings, but we use forums like this to extract and share that learning. One of the things that I've found since I've joined the department is there is loads of brilliant stuff going on that people do not know about. And so one of my jobs is to take that brilliant research from out of the drawers it's been sitting in and it's been influencing the local sort of policy area, and broaden it and share that understanding and make sure that we're therefore sharing the learning across modes, across local authorities, across sectors in a way that hopefully can accelerate the implementation of technology within the transport system. So another one of our research priorities is around system safety and ensuring transport is safe and secure. And there are so many roles of technology that we have here, things that we're very familiar with around air traffic control or rail control or the implementation of technology in future train driving control systems. And that photo on the left is actually some photo from my academic life where I've had PhD students who've observed rail signallers or train drivers getting eye movement data to understand how much time a train driver spends looking outside the cab and inside the cab with different types of technology. Having this scientific method to understand the impact of technology and the way it changes the way we deliver our transport is absolutely essential. Because if we're introducing these new technologies, it's really important we understand what we're bringing that's new, but also what we're changing about the nature of the transport use or the transport delivery. But you can also see some other emerging technologies here. In the bottom right of the slide, you'll see something that I think I've now seen in 3 or 4 different settings, the use of artificial intelligence to automatically interpret through computer vision CCTV data. Really, really important in understanding capacity in our transport systems, but also security from a sort of threats perspective as well. And what's really interesting is the way in which this technology that has been around in academia for 20, 30 years is finally reaching the point where its accuracy and its reliability is sufficient to enable it to be used in a real-world context. So the technology is now starting to be able to distinguish between different types of objects, different types of behaviours, and therefore be used as part of an operational oversight or response, which is really exciting. But in my view, we've still got too much separation between work that's happening in local authorities, work that's happening in aviation security, work that's happening in rail security, work that's happening in academia. So how we can bring all of that together to make sure we've got that cross-learning, I think, is a real priority, and why forums such as this are so important. One of the other priorities that you'll be very, very aware of is our need to achieve net zero. And there are many, many parts of my world that are involved in this, some of our major funding programs looking at new decarbonisation technologies, but also thinking about the behaviour change that will require, and I think when you hear from Chris later on, he will have a lot to say about the potential role of sort of walking and cycling towards our net zero mission, as well as towards our sort of personal health and well-being missions. But we need to understand the role of technology in enabling that behavioural change. Very often, we know that there are pinch points that affect the willingness to change behaviour as we choose our travel choice. So for me, if I'm choosing between my travel by train, which would always be my preference, or travel by road, I'll look at journey time, but I'll also look at journey quality. I'll look at access to PowerPoint. I'll look at my safety at the station if I'm waiting for a lift or waiting for a taxi to get home. I will look at the availability of information that I have to be able to dynamically manage my choice of travel as I move between the different modes as I'm travelling across the UK. So thinking about the role of technology as part of this overall behaviour change, I think, is really, really important. And beyond the sort of the personal information, we also know that we're having to change in terms of the way in which we are charging our vehicles, the technologies we're using. And it's really interesting to challenge ourselves about our understanding. We talk about something called a mental model, our understanding of how technology works and that influencing the choices we make. So how are we influencing the understanding of people who are using electric vehicles and their confidence in the information they have around the miles remaining they have before they need to replenish their electric vehicle charging? How much do people need to understand the role of hydrogen within our transport system? Do people care? And how do we encourage people to care about the carbon impact of their journeys that they're taking? And then one of the other things that we have a massive responsibility for within the department is the transport infrastructure that we deliver. Some fantastic work happening as part of the HS2 programme, thinking about the role of technology in improving the way in which we're delivering transport infrastructure to minimise its carbon impact, minimise its biodiversity impact, but also contribute to the levelling up agenda, which is one of the main missions around HS2 and other programmes. And it's everything from technology to look at deterring bats so that we don't disturb the natural wildlife as we're developing new infrastructure, to looking at the role of sensing technology in concrete to then minimise the waste of concrete in the production process. So the roles of technology we have are vast. And then there are some other more specific examples that many of you will be familiar with, which also contribute to that levelling up agenda. One of our main targets for levelling up is reducing the time travelled for people in different locations towards centres of employment. So actually managing traffic and delays is a really, really important part of that levelling up agenda, as the green light optimised speed advice example you see here describes. And we also know that there's an environmental cost to all of the signage that we have around our motorways. Not only the environmental cost of delivering through the electricity that information, but much more importantly, the environmental cost of building the gantries, of the concrete and the steel that's involved in the construction that enables those electronic displays to be present. So how can we move away from external displays to in-vehicle technology? What does that need to look like? How does that affect driver attentional requirements? And how can we get that mapping between the in-vehicle information and the information you have external to your vehicle? And we know that public transport has been dramatically affected by the COVID pandemic. So what do we need to do to restore traveller confidence and drive mode shift towards public transport use? Technologies that enable data sharing, that I know is very close to the heart of many people in this room, not only help us as those who are delivering transport systems to understand the interactions between different elements of the system, but also through making that data open and accessible, enable entrepreneurs and small and medium-sized enterprises to develop applications such as CityMapper to then provide information to the travelling public. But we need to think about this in the context of those wider users. And this is a great project that's been funded by a number of teams that looks at helping those who might be anxious about travelling to learn about travelling through a serious game, to get familiar with public transport, because very often people don't use public transport because of that fear of the unknown, because of that worry about the pinch points, worry about the different elements that they may need to overcome in order to use the public transport facilities. So I actually wanted to conclude by saying, right, I've given you loads of examples of transport technology that we add to the system. But actually, I think we need a complete mindset change. I'm interested in the fact that we have a transport technology forum, and it's not just a transport forum. Because actually, I fail to find any part of our transport system that doesn't have technology at its heart anymore. I don't think we should be thinking about roads as being civil infrastructure. I think they are civil and digital infrastructure. We're already seeing this in railways, and we've seen it for many years in aviation. This is a really nice example of the Tesla. How powerful is the Tesla as a car? But actually, it's a computer on wheels, really. If you can just see here, I think it says, now I can't see, 72 trillion operations per second that the computer within the Tesla executes. I think I was working out earlier, that's 6 times the capacity of a PlayStation. So actually, we're already seeing technology as a core part of our transport system. And I do think, actually, there is a challenge for us to make sure that we as a community are working really, really closely with the other aspects of the community. So we don't see technology as some sort of side add-on that has to be fitted into the physical infrastructure, but is a core part of the decision-making at a very early stage of design and implementation. And the final thing I want us to reflect on is that actually we can't think about technology in isolation. It sits within a wider societal, political, legal, and economic context. And so it's really important that we understand the role of technology within net zero, within active walking and cycling, within the levelling up agenda, because that's the way in which we will get this technology implemented and effective to transform the transport system in the way that I know we're all really keen to see. So thank you all very much.